Grandmaster Vugar Gashimov died in January at the tragically young age of 27. At his best, he was one of the top 10 players in the world, and he was liked and respected by chess players all over the world, not least in his home country of Azerbaijan, where it's no exaggeration to say that he was a national hero. And it's there that the first Gashimov Memorial Tournament has been organised, and it started today, and it features, well, some of the world's best players, Shahriar Mamedyarov and Temur Radyabov from Azerbaijan, Sergei Karyakin from Russia, Fabiano Caruana, and Hikaru Nakamura, and the world champion Magnus Carlsen. So it's a double round robin, so 10 rounds, and in this first round the pick of the games was that between Magnus Carlsen and Shahriar Mamedyarov, and that's the game we're going to look at now. Carlsen with the white pieces, and well, always interesting to see what opening he plays. Today he played a very orthodox mainline opening. I'm just going to go through these first moves fairly quickly, but it's fascinating to see Carlsen playing something that's so theoretical. Well, here, for example, he invites Mamedyarov to go into the highly theoretical and sharp line of the Botvinnik system, and this is just incredibly complicated. But instead, Mamedyarov backs down and plays something a lot quieter, the so-called Cambridge Springs variation, that starts with this move, Queen A5. Now, Carlsen is no stranger to this system with white and black. He played this in Reykjavik in 2004 when he was very young against Kasparov. Carlsen had white and he played knight d2 here. Today he played pawn takes d5, and he also has experience with this line. And here probably the main move is Queen d2, and Carlsen has played this before. And one of the big ideas, of course, of this so-called Cambridge Springs variation is to put pressure on this diagonal when this bishop has moved outside the pawn chain, so can no longer come to d2. And Carlsen played today rook c1, not the main move, but very respectable. In fact, Gelfand played this against Carlsen in the Candidates Tournament in 2013. So this has been seen before. So black brings this bishop out very quickly with tempo. He wants to get to Carlsen quickly, of course. And now, as is so often the case in these kind of Queen's Gambit positions, black has a problem developing this Queen's bishop when the pawn stands on e6, so b6 was played. Okay, a very standard move. And you might recall that Gelfand in the Candidates Tournament in 2013 played bishop d3 against Carlsen. And I'm just going to go through a few of those moves quickly. So, of course, this is the idea behind b6, to bring this bishop out, to exchange off this dangerous bishop on d3. Let me just show you a few more moves of this game, and we can see how Carlsen managed to break down Gelfand's centre, or at least to gain counterplay. So white has put the pawn on e5 and hopes to use this as a kind of spearhead for his attack on the king side, so he gains a lot of space. But Carlsen succeeded in gaining counterplay on the c-file like this, and here he managed to exchange and get a rook to the open file, and Carlsen had enough counterplay to offset Gelfand's space advantage. Now, think about this, and let's go back to our game today. Now, Carlsen, instead of playing bishop d3, played bishop e2. Now, this is all very subtle. There's a very slight difference between these two positions, between the Gelfand-Carlsen game and our game today. So in this case, after the exchange of bishops, the queen has ended up on e2 and not d3. Well, let's see what a difference this makes to the position. So once again, Carlsen has advanced with e4, as Gelfand did. Now, here, of course, Mamedyarov would very much like to break with c5 and get counterplay, as Carlsen did. But let's see what happens. In this case, d5 is a good move. So it's potentially a strong pass pawn, and you can see, here's the problem, black's pieces are cut out of play. And here, the queen can switch over to the king side. So it hits the knight, there's potential to attack with bishop h6, and this d-pawn is potentially dangerous. So I can understand why Mamedyarov declined to play c5 here. Instead he waited with rook c8. Carlsen pushed on. Okay, let's see what happens again if black breaks with c5. Well, here again this excellent move d5. A temporary pawn sacrifice. The pawn goes on, and black's problem here is that white breaks through, and again you can see that these pieces are shut out on the queen side, and this check is actually deadly. The only move to save material is rook f7 and then knight e5, and that's sets up this nasty pin here, and there's a nasty pin there as well. White wins material. So it's not possible for Mamedyarov to break and find counterplay, and now he's starting to improvise, and you can see that Carlsen's centre starts to roll forward. There's no doubt about it, Carlsen has an excellent position already. So he's able to use this space advantage, build up very nicely behind it, and this queen is a big problem. In fact, it's a problem for both these pieces again. They're rather shut out of play, sidelined at the side of the board. Now black could wait, but with perhaps a move like knight f8. But, well, it's kind of perilous to do that, leaving white to take the initiative with this centre. So Mamedyarov finally broke with c5, but it's not altogether satisfactory in this position. After d5 comes, you can see this bishop is struggling to enter play when it's blocked by its own pawn. Now, of course, it would be nice for white to get these two pawns together in the centre, but then there's a problem. Now we can actually use this queen at the side of the board. It's hitting this rook. After this exchange, you can see the rook is on prise. Let's go back. So rook takes d5. Good move. White is taking control over the open file, the open d file. Okay, how does white press his advantage here? At the moment it's not possible for black to challenge on the d file. That's the good news from white's point of view. But you can see these entry points are covered on the d file, so it's not possible for white to use that. But we have a classic squeezing strategy on the king side. I really like it when white has enough time and control to advance the h-pawn. So it's about gaining space and cramping black's king, but also it's very useful to give white's king an escape square. So let's see how this works in practice. Now, here Mamedyarov played knight g6, and he doesn't really manage to cut across white's plan. Now maybe he should have challenged on the d file, but this is still a very unpleasant position for black to play. But okay, he played knight g6, and well, the way Carlsen plays, once again, it's one of these situations where it seems like it's so easy for white to play, but that of course is because it's Carlsen playing and he makes it look easy. Here he could already play rook d8 check, and that's probably a good move, but well, I'm not going to criticise his play. He really played a perfect game today. So obviously if this is exchanged, then, well, that's not looking too good for black after the pawn recaptures and just starts to advance. Bishop b4, so that prevents the rook coming to the d-file for the time being, but switches back anyway, coming over here. Now what happens if black grabs a pawn? Now we can see how useful it was for white to advance this h-pawn. Watch this. So you can see that black's queen and bishop just cut out of play. And okay, the queen here threatens the f-pawn, but that's not the only problem for black. This rook can come down and it's going to be mate here. You can see this pawn does a superb job of controlling black's pieces. So this is black's problem. Just that d-file is just a running sore in his position. Okay, let's see how Carlsen increased his advantage. So he's managed to isolate this pawn here, and now he's going to come into this weak square here. And well, let's see again. Queen takes a2. It's really unpleasant. The queen can enter, and now the knight enters. So black is completely tied up, defending this knight, and then it's just a case of bringing the rook in, and after the bishop moves, that's going to be a fatal check. Okay, back to the game continuation. The queen comes back, but okay, first of all, Carlsen sidelines the bishop completely, controls the d-file, and now the knight comes in. It's so simple the way Carlsen plays this. He exchanges off that knight, so simplifies the position, but now black is just left with this dreadful bishop here. And here's a great move. Rook d3. It's so simple. The rook maintains control over the d-file, but controls the c3 square, preventing the bishop entering into the game. And, well, let's see what happens if black goes for this endgame. You can see, actually, it's just a horrendous position. The rook is going to enter. The rook can't move. The king is in some kind of mating net because of this pawn. Dreadful. So there's not a lot that Mamedyarov can do now. a4, good move, just preventing any kind of break here. And this is what a cool move from Carlsen now, advancing his g-pawn. In fact, what he's doing really is playing an endgame, because you know, black really can't escape his fate here. So, for example, well, let's see. This is the game continuation. If black exchanges here and protects this pawn, well, you can see that Mamedyarov has hardly any moves. White can simply bring his king up the board, advance with f5. It's all over. I mean, black can barely move his pieces here. I mean, what a picture this position is. So Mamedyarov tried something desperate. I mean, I think, you know, he knew he was lost here. But now, of course, his king is in dreadful trouble. It's a very simple piece sacrifice. If this is taken, then, well, it all happens with checks. With black's queen so far from the action here, it's terribly simple to force a checkmate. Okay, Mamedyarov tried one last desperate attempt to confuse Carlsen by giving up his rook to expose white's king, but this is actually very simple for white to avoid the checks. I mean, there are several ways to win here. This is really easy. You can check the king up the board, but it won't do you any good at all. Here, for example, now the king comes in and it's actually completely safe, and then it's white's turn. And in the game, this is what happens. With a few subtle moves from the king, it's actually very simple. And there's one last trick here. After bishop d2 check, it would be a big mistake to play king f5 because it's mate in 2 after queen b1. But Carlsen just took this with his rook. The king advances, It's nothing better for black here, and now it's all over. And in this position, Mamedyarov resigned. If the king goes back, then white's king goes in, so mate is threatened here in two different ways. And if queen d3 check, well, we just take here, and well, it's the king is completely safe. White's king is completely safe. And if black goes for an endgame instead, then one of these pawns, either the e pawn or the h pawn, is going through, and that's the end of the game. A really smooth victory from Magnus Carlsen. He makes it look very easy, but still 9 rounds to go. I should say that in the other two games, Karyarkin drew with Radyabov after a long struggle. Karyarkin had winning chances, but Radyabov managed to draw. And in the other game, Nakamura drew with Caruana. Caruana missed a win right at the death there. So Carlsen is in the lead after the first round.